Travis, my good soul. So it is day 4 of the ancient Israelite northern tribes, distinguished from the land of Judah under Jeroboam, who established a separate, distinct sukkot from Judah's holy day. And this is for the ingathering. The gathering of Israel is supposed to be from this. And I'm really hoping you can't hear the background, or my voice covers up the background, because apparently everybody's got a mouth going off this morning, and it's only 8 o'clock, but nonetheless, such is the way it is this morning. And so, as we are all in bondage, it is prophesied that Mormons likewise would be in bondage to the great and abominable church. And this is something the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints does not inform us as a prophecy that needs to be fulfilled, as the Book of Mormon goes into graphic detail to describe the great and abominable church that binds and yokes Mormons to Jesus. And so you're looking for a church where the leader of the church will get up in their version of conference and tell you that you need to bind yourself and yoke yourself to Jesus. So, I mean, fortunately, we're in the one true church of Jesus, where Nelson would never give a talk on binding yourself and yoking yourself to Jesus. Whew, and that was a close call. Right, Mormons? Right. And so, yes, even Joseph Smith carries on this theme in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 103, merging the two together. The Exodus from the harvest time, that is similar to the one that Moses had, and will rescue Mormons, because Mormons are in bondage to the great and abominable church. It has nothing to do with American bondage. That needs to be understood. This is not about taking over the government. The great and abominable church wants to take over the government and establish their one true religion and force it upon other people. And so, yeah, you're looking for a great and abominable church that has some kind of, like religious freedom movement in which they want to be exempt from the law and force other people, even other religions, to adhere to their version of the celestial kingdom. But again, we're in the one true church of Jesus, and they would never be involved in anything like that. Right, Mormons? The church is the one true church. And so I'm wasting my time here, aren't I? We're talking about a prophecy that will never happen because, the church is true. And so, yeah, you're the children of Israel. This is the Israelite Exodus, not the Jewish Exodus of Moses. Well, he was all of Israel too, so same thing. But it included Judah with Moses. This is just children of Israel, which, yeah, okay, but it's new Israelites, and of the seed of Abraham, and ye must needs be led out of bondage by power. So this is religious bondage. This is King Noah bondage with a stretched out arm. And what's the reason for it? So that we can establish and redeem Zion. Verse 15, behold, I say unto you, the redemption of Zion must needs come by power. And so then he concludes, and 18. And as your fathers were led at first, even so shall the redemption of Zion be. And so, this is the prophecy that we're looking for. And we're in day 4. And you kind of have to do it before the final day of the latter days, because the temple's supposed to be built. That's according to the prophecy in the Book of Mormon. That the saints, after the destruction of climate change and the election fraud attempt, will be gathered at Zion and the temple of Zion that's already built. And it's not built, and we're not there. Because the Great and Abominable Church is going to purposely hold Mormons in bondage away from their true Zion. Thus the need for the Exodus, so that they can go to the location of their actual Zion. And so, yeah, day 4, a 7-day feast period, and day 4. And this is after the tetrad for the latter days that was prophesied. So again, on your checklist of the latter day fulfillments, sun shall be darkened, moon turned to blood, and stars fall from heaven, all involved with the tetrad for the latter days, which the prophecies of Scripture all tell us it's 2017, 2024. And despite Matthew saying no man knows the day and the hour, which Mormons use as a cop-out to justify not searching for the signs, let alone the day and the hour, which is prophesied in Scripture. Because we know the beginning and the end of the latter days. And so everything prophesied for the latter days are to happen within this time frame, this 7-8 year time frame. And we're in it. And as I've been going over with you all the years, check, 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 check. And we just finished a check with the end of the tetrad with the lunar eclipse on election day. And so that's why I'm able to tell you what's next. And this is the Exodus part right here. And Mormons missed the first harvest, Exodus, which was in 2020. And there were prophetic, scriptural prophecies that have been checked off, and Mormons didn't. They rebelled, I guess. They're in bondage, blinded from knowing that this is the latter days, and that they were supposed to leave the church and go to Zion. Come to Zion, come to Zion. O Babylon, we bid thee farewell. We're leaving the mountains of Ephraim to dwell. But yes, we're supposed to leave. Exodus. The Great and Abominable Church are the ones who lie to us and tell us we have to stay, that they're the one true God and we must worship them, and then hold us in bondage. And so how is this? What is this bondage? Tithing. Plain and simple. It's a forced requirement. And once you get baptized at 8 years old, Brigham Young is the one who initiated it. It wasn't Joseph Smith. He really wasn't implementing tithing. It was a law of consecration that he was trying to establish. He was preparing Mormons to be Zion people. And so tithing was not a fallback as we're led to believe in Scripture, because I've gone over that with you, with the real history that this church refuses to tell us. And the reason why they refuse to tell us and why they're so stubborn is because their authority is on the line. Their whole existence and leadership and power and dominion and control rests on their not being exposed as frauds. that Brigham Young did nothing wrong when he did. And so, yes, the Kirtland Safety Society was sabotaged by the Danites. There was no illegal activity on the part of Joseph Smith. But because the Danites sabotaged him, people sued Joseph Smith. And he was able to get out of being locked up, even though I think he was locked up temporarily in jail, but he wasn't convicted of any of the 17 charges. And which is a type and shadow of the last days Mormon who is to be your Christ. And if you're remembering to make a checklist of searching for the man like Moses to lead you in the Exodus, because it's not Jesus, remember? I shouldn't have to keep repeating this over and over again. People have the internet now. They can do research. They claim they love religion and want to know all about it, and so they go to the first vision. Joseph Smith says, hey, the first creed of Christianity is an abomination. What is the first creed of Christianity? You're going to need to study it. You can't read, ponder, and pray and get revelation as to what it is. Sorry, you're going to have to study it. And so we have the internet with Google search. You can Google search first creed of Christianity. Oh, Jesus is the Christ. And that's an abomination? How? Well, because Constantine, in creating Jesus, turned Christians into anti-Semites. That's the abomination. He taught people to hate and to use violence to enforce that hate. That's an abomination. Those are crimes. Rights to life, liberty, and property were taken from the Jews because of what Constantine created. Tampering with their religion, tampering with their Christ, tampering with their scriptures, which were apocalyptic literature. And so likewise with Joseph Smith. And so Joseph dies, or I'm talking about tithing, wasn't I? So after the Kirtland Safety Society, he then proceeds to, that was 1837, and so now 1838. So he begins to work on the first vision and the other visions, not history. He uses the word history, but they're visions. We are told they're visions by him. So they're not history, even though he says history. And if he were to say Jesus, we're supposed to understand it's a vision and not actually Jesus. Just like the Book of Mormon. It's a prophecy book of apocalyptic literature. Therefore, when it says Jesus, it's not real Jesus, because Constantine created him. Once you understand Constantine created Jesus, you now understand you cannot impose Jesus of Constantine onto anything. It's so frustrating to try to get this through to people. But that's how they put you in bondage. And so the Danites, having failed to lock up Joseph again, and now he's coming out and saying he's not Christian and Jesus is not his Christ, and this is who their real Christ is supposed to be, the Danites are furious. And so they gather at their headquarters at Adam-on-Diamond and they commence the election fraud in Daviess County. They purposely brought in the Danites from all over to go to war in that election fraud to ensure that their candidate gets put in and the other candidate is rejected and kicked out, denied. And yes, Senator Mike Lee's ancestor, John D. Lee, was a part of that. And so, like ancestor, like descendant. And the church supported him illegally. The church endorsed Mike Lee. That's illegal. Church is not allowed to do that. Church claims they don't do that. They did it. They lied to us, and they got Lee elected because all Mormons know whoever the church endorses, Mormons will vote for. And thus the election fraud for this midterms. And nobody's talking about it. I've reported to the feds. Nothing's being done about it. I reported it to McMullen. Nothing's being done about it. I hope he didn't concede. I'm fearing that he actually did. Dumbass. You're a victim of election fraud. You're a CIA officer. You know you don't concede when there's crimes. You wait for the investigation before you make your decision. So frustrating to get through to people in government. To have justice done. Because again, life, liberty, property. Violations of those are crimes, and they must be treated unbiased and equally across the board. No favoritism for anybody. No delay of investigations when, under normal circumstances for a regular person, we'd be locked up immediately. This is so sick and wrong. And so, yeah, the Mormon War got started, and Joseph was framed and sent to Liberty Jail, and Brigham Young cooed the church. Took over leadership positions as the Danites threatened leaders to leave under the penalty of death. And so Brigham Young, after Joseph Smith was assassinated under his orders and Judas payment, finished the Nauvoo temple and required that Mormons pay tithing so that they can participate in the ordinances thereof, despite Isaiah saying, come buy and eat wine and milk without honey and without price. However, that's supposed to be quoted. It's referring to the temple, and it's supposed to be free. But yes, you are allowed to donate your offerings to God under the economic conditions that you're in. You're not supposed to be extorted for temple worship, for God worship. And thus, Jesus, the story where he whips everybody at the temple, the money changers. They're making a profit off of people and exploiting the poor. And so, yes, that was a crime. And the story helps us understand that you are not supposed to rob God. It has nothing to do with making sure you pay tithing, extortion racket money, protection racket money. And that's what Brigham Young used tithing for. It was your debt to Jesus, who supposedly paid our debt so that we don't have to pay a debt. This is what he did as a crime. He was a mob boss, extorting people, Mormons, for their protection from God, their afterlife position, and their righteousness on earth, and all that stuff. It's a horrible abomination, as he likewise turned Joseph Smith's Christ into Jesus. And so he, with that tithing, any other crimes are now aggravated. And so he was practicing polygamy in secret. They're the Danites. They were framing Joseph Smith. So frustrating when ex-Mormons think they know it all, and they believe other people who accuse Joseph Smith, when no, they're lying to us. But don't do your research, and so you become a gullible sucker. That's part of the bondage. As women who were in bondage under polygamy to Brigham Young and their Danites were threatened with death to frame Joseph. Do you not understand how this works? Do you not understand Elizabeth Smart? This is why she did not seek to run away from him at any opportunity she had. She went into shock. She's a little girl. This is what bondage does to people. And it was horrible to hear Mormons talk about how Elizabeth Smart wasn't very smart, that she should have just run away and escaped, and so therefore she wasn't really kidnapped. Dear God, people are horrifying and atrocious. And so anyway, it turns polygamy into sex trafficking. That aggravates the crime. And when Brigham Young took these sex trafficked women out of the country, aggravated the sex crime. And he's also kidnapping Mormons under extortion. You know, come with me. I am the one who speaks for God now. He's now an occult leader. And it's not a cult leader, even though he had nothing to do with any of the occult practices that have now been framed on Joseph, because he turned his apocalyptic literature into literal history. And so now Joseph is a witch, speaking with the dead, using crystal balls in a hat to, you know, see things. That's witchcraft. And Joseph Smith had nothing to do with that. Yes, he was a kid, and he had rocks in a hat that he played games with other people on. He's a kid. Do you not understand this? And you have people who say, yeah, he was getting money through witchcraft and getting rich. Really? Joseph Smith was rich? From his rocks in a hat? No, he wasn't. He was sued for glass looking because he wasn't making and finding silver in the mines where Josiah stole. And I showed you the evidence of that court document in yesterday's video. So frustrating how people think they're smart because they think they know things, and they really don't. They're not putting 1 + 1 together and coming up with the 3 for synergistic math. And so, yes, he gets to the valley. He immediately murders natives to secure his kingdom of Zion. He has replaced the Zion of Joseph Smith, as he replaced everything else of Joseph's. He's still framing Joseph. Oh, Joseph Smith said we're supposed to do this. Joseph Smith said that we're supposed to follow Lucifer now. I'm putting his symbol on the keystones. The Logan Temple was under him, I believe. We can confirm. But the Nauvoo Temple, he designed the Salt Lake Temple, even though it wasn't finished until he was dead, after he was dead. Logan LDS Temple. Okay, yeah, it was under John Taylor. So, yeah, Nauvoo Temple was the only one that showed us, manifested to us, that Brigham Young worshipped the devil. And called it Jesus. And said it was Joseph's. Dear God, what an evil man he was. And 1848 then comes around. United States comes in. Mexico secedes the country or the territory to the United States, and it's now the United States territory. They don't acknowledge Brigham Young's claims. They want nothing to do with him. He's nobody in their eyes. After all, they were coming after him for all sorts of crimes. And he then, in 1849, incorporates the Perpetual Immigration Fund. He's now wanting to build up an army against the United States. And so what he does is he has Mormons put tithing into this fund, and the fund is used to bring the saints from Europe to America to build up an army against the United States. And when they get to the valley, they're required to work off the debt, and thus pay tithing on top of it. So you see aggravated charges here. Here you've got slavery and human trafficking that Brigham Young's now involved in, and getting Mormons to likewise be criminals for. He's compromising them into criminal activity, along with his crimes that he's committing against the Mormons. And so in 1851, he then publicly announces to the church, "We are openly practicing polygamy in defiance of the United States." And Mormons can't see that he's an evil, bad man because he's framing Joseph Smith for all of it. And so, yes, the church continues their tithing scam and fraud and crime, as 8-year-olds are child trafficked, slave child labor. We're required to pay tithing as kids. My parents bought me the little tithing box. I'm supposed to put my tithing in there and give it to the bishop. My parents went over and taught us how 10% of what any source of income we get, which is in violation of Brigham Young's commandment for tithing that he put in there, claiming that this was what Joseph was practicing after the Kirtland Safety Society failure. No. Willard Richards was ordered by Brigham Young to alter all the documents, forge documents, and add stuff and take stuff away. You know, like changing the name of the church. And so, yes, Joseph never wanted to practice tithing. He wanted Mormons to live the higher law of consecration. And Brigham Young has altered that into a slave conditions, where you give everything, you own nothing. The kingdom is more important than you in your life. That's not how the Book of Mormon tells us the economy is supposed to be. After condemning priestcraft, they then say, if you work for money, you're not working for God, and you will fail. Your economy will fail. Any monetary system of economy will fail because it creates an inequality in society. There has to be poor, there will be rich under any form of economy. Even communism fails. Fascist economies fail. Capitalism fails. Barter system fails. Other types of economy fail. No economy can work when it's a monetary system. And so he then explains everybody, whatever work they choose to do, you're supposed to obviously give for yourself, but then you give to Zion from what your work produces. So you're a farmer, you produce potatoes, Idaho potatoes, because those are the best. And they're the biggest. I mean, I've seen the postcards. There's a potato so big an 18-wheeler flatbed was required to carry the potato to the market. I've seen it. It's true. Those craters of the moon soil are optimal growing for potatoes there. And and so obviously you need to eat, and you're making the potatoes, so you take what you need, but then you are thinking of others. And so you also produce potatoes for others, and you give those to the storehouses of Zion, and then others are able to bring what they are offering to Zion there and take what they need and want for their lives. And everybody prospers. There is no monetary system. There is no system of, oh, he has more potatoes than me. That's not fair. Everybody gets what they need and want. And so if you want to have potatoes for every single meal of the day, great. There's no problem with this. Nobody should be jealous. Nobody should be selfish, because you get what you need and what you want. Why are you concerned about other people getting what you think they don't need and what they don't want when you get what you need and what you want? All of that should be gone. The human factor is removed from the equation because there's no monetary system of economy in there. But the church uses a monetary system for their church, and it's screwing up the situation. Jesus, for example, has a story where he's talking to a rich man, and the rich man is saying, I'm perfectly obedient, follow the 10 commandments, what more is there for me to do so that I may gain the highest degree of the celestial kingdom? Get married to a woman? But Jesus says, give up your wealth and follow my example. And the rich man couldn't do it. He couldn't give to the poor so that they are elevated out of poverty. The church is filthy rich, beyond what you guys think they're rich of. They're far richer. And they're not giving Mormons the money. They say to the IRS, yeah, the money we make is for charitable purposes for Mormons. Nope. The percentage that they give to Mormons is minuscule and in the negative percentile. They cannot give of their substance. Their wealth consumes the prophets. The prophets profit. And they hoard the money. Even when Nelson came out and confessed, we're following the parable of the talents, which means they're hoarding the money to give to Jesus at his second coming. And it's here. It's now. And they didn't do it. They're still keeping the money from their Jesus, because he doesn't exist, but nonetheless, they're hoarding the money. It's a rainy day, and they're hoarding the money, and they're still taking more, as much as they can. The voting boxes where you give your money away to the church, they opened it early, and they're gonna open it in more locations this time. I did the video on it. they're still getting any amount of money that they can. They're worse than Ebenezer Scrooge. They're worse than Scrooge McDuck. They are filthy rich. The richest group and individual on the face of this earth throughout all of history. And they claim to be a religion, and they're not given of their wealth. They're holding Mormons in bondage. As the debtor example that I gave in a video the other day. The parable of the man who owed a debt, and the person, the creditor, said, "I forgive you of your debt." But then that person then went and found other people that owed him a debt, and he demanded that they pay the debt and punish them for it. And so the original creditor then punished him for not being merciful to those who owed him a debt. This is what the church has done. The United States government has allowed them to be tax exempt, but under conditions that they give of their money, that they don't hoard it for, a rainy day or a second coming or a millennium. And Nelson confessed, yeah, we're in violation of tax law. Their criminality is extreme, and Mormons have been blinded from birth, thinking this is the way that God wants it. Jesus says I have to be a sex slave. As a child, Jesus wants me for a sex trafficker to shine for him each day. In every way pay a full tithe. To him I won't rob God. A human trafficker, well, anyway, you get the point. Children are brainwashed in primary to be slaves, to know their place and pay the debt to Jesus, which is to the church, who hoards the money. And this is an abomination. And, as I've been exposing for you, Nelson is returning polygamy. He's setting it all up. He's changed it in the temple texts for the endowment. The law of the gospel, law of obedience. You women think you've been given freedom? I can't help you understand any more fully. It was a trap. He took your veil away. It's a trap. And you get fooled. Oh, we're now allowed to wear slacks on our missions and at church. Yay, the church is true now. They're no longer sexist. Oh my God. It's a trap. So yes, the law of chastity now has wording for polygamous marriages, because he put in, according to his law, to reestablish the plural pronouns for polygamy. Because his law is section 132, which is polygamy. And so, yeah, the law of the gospel. It's now, the gospel is no longer about Jesus, it's about polygamy, because it's according to his law. That's the key word. His law. What's his law? Polygamy. Section 132. Framing Joseph. To justify it. Because Brigham Young replaced Joseph Smith's monogamy chapter the year before he died. And thus why the government doesn't come after the church for violating their agreement, because they took out John Taylor's polygamous revelations. Because John Taylor was during the crime period. But by Brigham Young putting in section 132 the year before he died into the Doctrine and Covenants, claiming it was Joseph, the United States let that go, but forced Wilford Woodruff to do the official declaration to Mormons, but they didn't even put it in their scriptures until 1908. And so when he gives it in 1890, it's only read to the church and maybe published in the Deseret News, but he didn't make it canon for the church. And it's still in contradiction with Section 132 now. We have the official declaration that the church is now going to be good and not violate the law anymore, and yet they still have Section 132. The church cannot stop committing crimes. They're in complete and utter violation of the law, and it's causing Mormons to be criminal and to be victims of crime, because the endowment or the sealing ceremony text has women property to their husbands. Women are sex slaves to their husbands, and men are sex trafficked as well, because they are required to pay the church tithing money. And if it were just an offering so that the pastor of the church can get paid for his support, the government has no problems with that. But this isn't the case with the church, because as I've experienced, when you get married through a bishop, you don't pay the bishop. It's free. Bishop is already taken care of because he's a lay minister and he has to work for a living. And yet we're required to pay to go to the temple, when everybody who works in the temple, except for the janitors and the cooks, are lay ministers. The 70, who's the president of the temple, and the officers and the clerks, there is some payment jobs, but that's separate. The ones in charge of the actual marriage don't get paid. They work for the church. It's a missionary service, and so it's so frustrating. So here we go. This is the bondage that has Mormons trapped. And for Mormons to get angry at me, yeah, this is what the church has done to you. They've weaponized you. They've compromised you to be a criminal. They've compromised you as a victim of crime, and they get you to be their weapon to perpetuate their crimes, so that you attack other people, so that you threaten other people. Oh, you're not following the covenant path, elder. You need to get back on that path. This is criminal to a very abominable degree. And for Mormons not to get this shows how blind you've become, how the church has caused a stumbling block. This is not normal. This is not freedom and liberty. This is not from a God of love. And all the manifested signs tell you this. And they've tricked you into redefining them and reinterpreting them to be good. Yeah, Isaiah calling good evil and evil good. You fell for it. You're fulfilling prophecy. You're in bondage. You need help getting freed. And day 4 is upon us.